So I'm going to go into, wait on a second. I'm going to go into this idea of more deeply of withdrawing the mind from the world and how that can connect us to our imagination and how that works and how that relates to meditation and a particular type of meditation. I touched on it last week, but I want to go into it more deeply this week. So this is where I'm talking about imagination and withdrawal. Okay. So as human beings, it seems that we crave peace sometimes. We feel like we want to detach. Once in a while, we want to take a break. And we have different ways of doing that. And of course, the most obvious one is, going for a walk somewhere peaceful, somewhere quiet. And that's a very common thing, especially these days when life is very busy. But it's been like this for a long time. People, we feel that there's a time to withdraw. So that's what I would call a natural way of withdrawing your mind. Something that is also uniquely human is what I would call artificial ways of withdrawing our minds from, or sort of detaching from our normal state of mind, which is something you'll find in all kinds of societies in different forms. And it can look something like this, all right? So it's always been a curious thing to me that every culture has their drug. So the drug of preference in, let me think, South America or some certain South American cultures, what might that be? Anybody happen to know? You guys we get to talk about drugs. Come on, tell me. You can put it in the chat if you like, or tell us. Or what about, well, India? Europe is an easy one. Anybody got Irish ancestry? They're very famous for this. So in and nowadays, of course, everything's available to everybody. So subcultures have their drugs of preference. So you'll find when I grew up in New Zealand, when I was younger, everybody drinks. But then when we became teenagers, then we discovered marijuana and some other kinds of drugs. But that was a cultural thing. It was a certain demographic, a certain generation. It's generational, not just cultural. But that it struck me as very odd that why is it that, in South America, the one that I was thinking of was ayahuasca, which is part of a sort of shamanic, what's used a lot in shamanic religious ceremonies. In Central America, there's been a lot of use of mescaline, as in the peyote cactus. In Europe, the Druids, in addition to drinking a lot of alcohol, the Europeans also traditionally used, again, the shamans use psilocybin mushrooms. So the active ingredient is psilocybin, and it comes in this, they're called magic mushrooms or gold top mushrooms. And then we've got various forms of hashish and opium and all the derivatives of that. So there's a whole range of ways that people have discovered, and they're all originating, they're chemicals originating from either plants or fermentation or preparations. But human beings have discovered these all across the world in all different cultures because it seems that we have some desire to change our state of mind and kind of be able to step back and detach from the world and go inward. And we've discovered ways of doing it artificially. And people seem to like it. And of course, very open to abuse and often very damaging. But our urge for that seems to be so strong that we still persist in doing that. And of course, some of these are very addictive as well. So that's the second way. So remember, there was 3 different ways I'm talking about of withdrawing the mind. So there's artificial methods of drugs and alcohol, different types of substances. There's a natural way of finding peace and altering your state of mind by going into nature. And the third way is what I call the deliberate method. And that is, so here, let's look a bit more at the escaping into nature one before we come to the third method. So this, of course, is the famous passage from Thoreau's experience where he wrote his some of his work. So he wrote, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach and not. And when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. So the poets and writers and musicians and people wanting to discover something often go somewhere quiet. Dylan Thomas was famous. Well, he used to, he was an alcoholic, that was his drug of choice. But he would often wake up in the middle of the night when it was really inspirational, when his poetry would come to us. And Beethoven, of course, was known to love nature and go in the forest when he was seeking inspiration. So there's something, this is an extreme form of this getting into nature. I want to just play you this little video. Convenient cure for depression. This is my favorite quote from an astronaut. Edgar Mitchell was the fourth, I don't know, the 11th man to land on the moon, or to walk on the moon, I think, or the fourth, or no, I think it was the 11th. But he said, you develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, look at that, you son of a bitch. So Edgar Mitchell managed to get me to swear in public. Very good. So I love this idea that, you know, he had this. I'll tell you a bit more about his experience, because he actually did some remarkable work apart from going to the moon. So he had this experience he's describing here on the way back from the moon, when he was in the capsule coming back. I forget what's the name of the transporter unit. He was sort of watching the universe and the Earth, and for I think it was about 2 days the journey was, and he just went into this euphoric state, and it was continuous, and he was really high, and he didn't know what was happening to him, but he liked it. But when he got back to Earth, he spoke to some of his friends who were more into psychology and anthropology, and he kind of wanted to know whether he was crazy or not, because he felt very different than his usual state of mind. And some of them knew quite a bit about Indian culture, and they said, oh no, this is described in this scripture. It's called samadhi. So that's the yogic term for a spiritual trance. And you know, they described to him what the scripture said. He said, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what happened to me. So he discovered this kind of feeling of incredible euphoric oneness through this method, which is obviously not so convenient for all of us. But he actually went on to do a couple of interesting things. He co-founded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, I think it's called. It's a kind of spiritual intellectual organization. They hold conferences all the time, and it's about exploring this experience of oneness through meditation, spiritual practice, philosophy, and science, all of them. But the other thing he did, which I think maybe was even more interesting, was he founded with other astronauts and cosmonauts an association, an international association of spacefarers. And these were all famous people, especially, you know, this is the 1960s, so they were the sort of national heroes in Russia and America. But they got together and they formed an association, and they put a lot of pressure on their own governments and influenced them and got them to sign a treaty banning the weaponization of space. So one of the great fears at that time is that there would be, anyone as old as me will remember it. You know, we were concerned that there was going to be nuclear war, but there was never any space-mounted missiles, and that's because the astronauts and cosmonauts actually, it was their idea that this would be completely banned, that space would remain a peaceful zone, and it's remained that the case up till now, I think. We're not actually, but yeah, you know, the inspiration came from this spiritual experience. So I really love what he did with his life and where it came from. So for us, I mean, there is a way this. So we have this power of imagination. We can imagine, and we can develop this, and we can places that we've never been to. I'm sure we've experienced that many times. So we're capable of creating this kind of internal hallucination, essentially. So the power of internal visualization is very strong, and this is one of the mental technologies that we utilize in Tantra to help to shift our state of mind and realize what our true nature is. So that whole science of visualization in particular broadly is called Jantra. As we have mantra, which we're practicing with to a degree. So mantra is using sound and the effect sound of the mind. It has, even we're not hearing it out, we're repeating it now, still affects. So Jantra is another part of the whole science of Tantra, using visualization to transport to another, you could say. So that is a method we use for, one of the methods for withdrawing from the world with this inner world of nation. It's called yoga, and it doesn't cost $100 million. It would cost a few to go space. So we also have access to, to varying degrees. We have access to going in nature and experiencing nature and enjoying that feeling. So I just want to I'm going to run a little poll for you, all right? I like polls. Here's my little poll. And ask your favorite places in nature. What's your favorite kind of environment? So I'm going to launch this little poll. So you get to choose. There's a limited number. I've just kind of randomly picked 7. So it's you got the option of just saying what's your favorite. It might be by the ocean, by a waterfall, watching the stars at night, being on a top, being in the forest, on the desert, or in snow fields. All right. So I want you to pick. You only get to pick one. I'm sorry. I love all of them, but I'm sure you might too. But you get to pick your favorite. So I am going to all allow panelists to vote. Yes, there is your poll. Okay. So while you're doing that, I'm going to just make sure everybody can speak. And let's see. It's not fair. I'm not allowed to vote. Anyway, I'm going to tell you what I would have voted for. Okay, quite a few of you. There's a few of you haven't voted yet. So at the moment, oceans. If the ocean's a favorite, have voted for the ocean, not something else. He likes the desert, apparently, or the snowfields. Well, not their favorite. Oceanside is still, waterfalls are coming up there in the second. 3 people like waterfalls, 5 of you like Oceanside, stars at night, mountaintops, forests. Poor little desert and snowfields are all lonely and unloved. Okay, so what have we got? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Almost all of us have voted. There's 16. Okay, so, and you can all see the results here. You can take a look. So Oceanside, for some reason, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. My favorite's waterfalls. This happens to be mine. Or stars at night. I kind of like, I'm crazy about both. All right, that's interesting to see what people like. So this experience that we have when we go to one of these places, somewhere that we really love, and that is something that's a relatively affordable way of doing it. It's not always depending where you live, and you know, if you have access to that. Wait a second. But we can also do this internally. So it's not always easy. So if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine you're in a very peaceful place by the ocean, since a lot of you prefer the ocean. You're sitting by the ocean and, you know, you're feeling the waves and you can hear that lovely sound and you're feeling maybe a warm breeze and it's very peaceful. What often happens is, you know, you might start off trying to imagine that and it might begin to come, but then you get distracted, right? You pull back. It's like tethered to the world. There are things that we are drawn back to, and it might be things we're anxious about, so it might be something negative, or it might be something we want to do. It might be food, or, you know, something we're planning to do tomorrow that we're looking forward to, but the world pulls us back. So in a sense, we're addicted to the world. There are things that we love to do, that we love about the world, and we want to re-engage all the time. So this makes it difficult for us to withdraw, because we have to let go. So another meaning of pratyahara is a kind of a letting go. And we find it difficult because, well, one of the reasons we find it difficult is because we are kind of like this. So this is how they catch monkeys in India, or in Asia usually. So they'll get a coconut, right, and put something that the monkey likes inside and make a hole which is just big enough for the monkey to put its hand in. But once it grabs the food, it can't get its hand out because the hole's not big enough. So the monkey's trapped and the coconut's anchored to, typically tied to a tree or something. And then the monkey won't escape. When the hunters come to catch the monkey, it theoretically could let go of the food and run away, but they don't, because they're trapped by their own desire. Has anybody ever experienced anything like that? So if you're human, I'm afraid the answer is bound to be yes. We get trapped by things that we want, by our own wanting them. So this is what the idea of detachment is all about. Detachment means letting go of clinging on, no longer clinging on to the world, and so that it doesn't have power over you. And that, especially, they talk about it a lot in Buddhism, but it's a very central concept in yoga as well. But it's only if you're really, really detached and you're not kind of clinging on to different things that you can really be free. So this letting go, as I said, is called pratyahara. Here's another kind of attachment or clinging addiction that we see all too much. It's kind of a bit of a disturbing picture, actually, isn't it? So the reason I picked this one in particular, there's a series, somebody made half a dozen of them, but, you know, obviously they've done some fancy photography work, is it's very common that we are attached to things in the world around us, in the world of the senses, you could say. Then we connect to the world through our senses. So all of these things that we connect to are kind of one step removed from us. And we look through our eyes, we experience the world through our senses, but the I, the self, is separated from the world. We live in two worlds. We have this internal world where we have dreams and thoughts and emotions and memories and all of that. And we experience the external world as a kind of picture inside our minds with other senses giving us input. So we're seeing the world through a kind of a window. What's happening with these devices and the computers we're looking at right now, or the phones that you're watching this on right now, it's another level of separation from the self. Okay, so looking out into the world is one step away from ourselves. Looking through a device, through another window into the electronic world, is a second step away from the self. And this concerns me because we have a whole generation of children who are growing up very addicted to these devices, where they're kind of losing touch with themselves. And it has a very, there are many psychologists and sociologists are really concerned about the effect it has. And I think part of the reason is it's not just that they're engaging with the world, they're engaging with the world beyond that world and really losing that connection to their core selves. So in that situation, I think that meditation becomes even more important as a kind of antidote to that, to reconnect to ourselves regularly, like every day, twice a day, and to make sure that we don't get really emotionally confused and detached and unable to be natural and to really know who we are in the first place. So this phenomena of addiction to devices and these sort of experiences that are not just of the world, but even another level removed from ourselves is something that we need to be very wary of. Okay, who knows who this is? I want that in the chat. I'm sure some of you know. Or you can tell us if you want. Nobody knows who this is? I bet you do. Yeah. Oh, you know what? For some reason, two of you. Yeah. So Siddharma, thanks. Eric Clapton. Yes, Eric Clapton is a incredible guitarist and one of my kind of guitar heroes. But he has not had an easy life. And I read his autobiography. It's an incredible book. It's beautifully written and very touching, very honest. Yes, magnificent. And he's been through very severe addiction problems to both heroin and alcohol. So he was, when he was 19, they were writing on the subway walls in New York that Clapton is God. He was with the band Cream, and they were a super group. They were sort of, after the Beatles, perhaps they were the next really giant rock group. Well, the Rolling Stones. And, there was one of those extraordinarily successful musical groups and magnificent musicians. But he was incredibly unhappy. When he writes about that period of his life, he said it was the most miserable time of his life. He was very young. He was very confused. He had more money than he knew what to do with. He was famous, and he was completely hooked on heroin and alcohol. So he managed to get over the heroin addiction, but he was still struggling with alcohol for a long time. And then he sort of got his courage together and admitted himself to a rehabilitation clinic in, I think it was in New York State. And it was meant to be, apparently it was a really good place. They're best psychologists and real experts and people that were really, the best that money could buy, obviously. So he went in there, and I think he was there for 2 months. And he writes about this, and he says, he went through the program and he felt much better, and he felt he was able to manage without drinking. And at the end, he kind of graduated with flying colors and went back into his life. And he was okay for quite a while. It was more than a year. But then he got too confident, and he thought he was safe to take a drink. And he was an alcoholic, actually. He is an alcoholic. To some degree, it's a genetic thing, I believe. So he took a drink, and before he knew it, he was again hooked on alcohol, and really his life fell apart completely. So that went on for a while, and he couldn't stand it anymore, and he again went back to rehabilitation. He was really desperate, and he went back to the same place. Actually, he went through the program, and as they got towards the end of the rehabilitation program, they all the therapists and that were saying, "You're doing great, you're fine," but he was really freaked out because he knew that he was kind of fooling them and fooling himself. He knew he hadn't gotten over it, and he didn't know what to do because he had the best experts and they couldn't help him. He didn't see how he could conquer this addiction, and his life seemed like there was no hope for him. So he had this moment of extreme despair, and he describes it so beautifully in the book. He said, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I have some idea of a supreme being, a creator, some higher power. And he said in that moment of absolute despair, he fell on his knees and he asked for help. And he writes in the book, he said, in that moment, I lost the desire for alcohol forever. And when I read it, I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. It's a very, very powerful piece of you can say self-reflection and kind of confession, saying, I'm everyone thinks I'm a hero, but I'm just another human being like that. And I've got my problems and weaknesses. But when I surrendered to this higher power, it solved my problem. I was free. So I love this story. And in a way, that's the ultimate kind of letting go. It's surrendering to ultimately your own higher self, that accepting that there's a part of you that's more powerful than you realize. And if you really let go of your ego and your idea that your little self can solve these big problems, and let that supreme part of yourself take control, you'll be amazed what can happen. So I thought he was an incredible testimony of that. And I know that in organizations like AA, they have many stories like this. And this is very much a part of their creed and a part of the extraordinary success of that approach to severe addiction. So I love that story. And I think it's a very, his story I felt was a very spiritual story, actually. So, this is just for you to ask yourself, because it might be something private, but just ask yourself for a moment, just take a moment to reflect. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe there's something small that you're kind of hooked on. Maybe you're hooked on Netflix. That's probably the most widespread addiction right now, where everybody's stuck at home, right? So maybe you're hooked on Netflix. I'm just using it as an example. You're hooked on Netflix and you realize you could be doing something much more constructive with these weeks and months that we're spending, with probably a lot of time where we could do something. We could meditate, we could do something creative, we could write some music, we could connect with friends we haven't seen for years that would love to hear from us. There are many much more useful things we could do than watching more than a certain amount of something like Netflix or YouTube. But it might not be that. It might be something completely different. It might be chocolate. It might be something that you're hooked on. So I want you to just close your eyes for a second and just reflect for a minute. What is the thing that I feel that, if I just let go of that and didn't have, could just muster the will to, give that up for a week completely. It's best to approach these things, maybe pick a small thing, but give it up completely for a week. So it's a small period of time. So that's kind of achievable. Think if there's something that you can come up with. Just pick one. Just pick one. I'm reading a really neat book on habits. It's called Atomic Habits, and he really recommends that start small, get something that's achievable, win a small victory, and that can get you started on a really good path. So, okay, just remember what it was and just keep it in the back of your mind, because we're going to come back to that at the end. All right, so this poor little monkey I've been picking on here, we're going to go on beyond the monkey into what I think of as a very healthy kind of addiction. So why is it that human beings have these unique behaviors where we we want something more? We're not satisfied with our state of mind. You don't find, I don't know, squirrels taking drugs. um, you don't find beavers expanding their territory and taking over all the dams and streams and rivers in a whole area and making a big beaver empire. They have, once they got their territory and they got their little pond and their dam and they managed to stop the water running, because they don't like the sound of water running. Actually, they're compelled to block streams. But once they've got their space that they need, that's enough. But human beings don't do that. Human beings, they get a house, and then they, oh my God, look at that house over there. It's kind of bigger. I want one like that. And eventually they become, it becomes an empire and they begin conquering it. So human beings have this drive for limitlessness. And there's a beautiful saying, which I probably should have here. In the living being, there's a thirst for limitlessness. That's from the guru of Anandamaga, Anandamurti. So the way he describes it, he says, it's actually this desire that pushes us often in a bad direction, like being addicted to something kind of meaningless like Netflix, or something self-destructive like heroin. This is actually coming out of this desire for limitlessness. And the problem is when we don't direct it in the right way. So if we don't satisfy that limitless yearning internally and by connecting to the only limitless thing, which is cosmic consciousness, or Brahma, as we would say in Sanskrit, this spiritual reality has no boundary. So if we that's the only place we can satisfy this desire. And if we don't, then we're going to be prone to getting hooked on other things. So when I first understood that, when I was young and I just discovered the path of yoga, that was like a revelation for me. I thought, oh my God, all these things I'm running after, the things themselves aren't what I'm looking for. The feeling that gives me temporarily, that's the feeling I like. But actually, I can tap into that feeling directly, internally, and to a limitless quantity of it if I learn to meditate deeply. For me, that was a giant eye-opener. And so I think of meditation and spiritual practice and kirtan and these practices that give us that direct experience of limitless happiness. That's a healthy addiction. Okay, it's like that's the only addiction that I would encourage, because generally it's a problem. Some are mild, of course, some less so. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you about today. I thought, oh no, there's one more thing. Very important, of course. Okay. So here are these 8 limbs of yoga, right? So there's jama, niyama, so I'll translate them. Okay. So this is my little bit crazy translation. Let's go back to the Sanskrit. So jama, it means to control, actually, to control, well, our behavior. And it refers to the 5 first ethical principles of yoga. And things, like not harming others, using words benevolently, not stealing, and so forth. Then niyama is the second, niyama is the second one. That's about contentment, cultivating contentment, being accepting that there are things beyond our control. That's a pretty important one in this current situation where there's a lot of people are very worried about what's happening in the world, but they can't do anything about it directly, or we can only do a very little bit about it. Maybe in our immediate surroundings, maybe we can help somebody. But there's this feeling of life and the world being out of control. And that's very disturbing. So cultivating a feeling of contentment and just acceptance that, okay, there are things beyond my control. It's always been like that. It wasn't like it just started last month. Like the world was never in your control. So, you know, there's no point in getting upset about things that you can't control. So that's called Santosh. That's a part of Niyama. But there are 5 of these, and then there's this whole kind of system, if you like, for leading a deeply happy and fulfilling life. It's an amazing system. These 8 limbs of yoga. So the asanas, the yoga postures, pranayama is breathing exercises, or controlling the prana through the breath, the vital energy. Samadhi, that's the experience that Edgar Mitchell had in his spaceship, a kind of samadhi. There are different levels of spiritual trance. Dharana or dhyan is a spiritual meditation. Dharana is concentration. And pratyahara is what we're talking about this week. That's the deliberate withdrawal of your mind from the world. And the second part of it is, again, it's deliberately letting go of the things that we're clinging on to that make it difficult for us to withdraw from the world, the things that we're addicted to. So there's kind of 2 aspects of pratyahara. There's the turning our attention inward and moving away from the world, going into a quiet place internally, but also deliberately letting go of the things that are preventing us or making it difficult for us to do that. And there are some practices like if you have the second lesson in Ananda Marga meditation in this series of 6 lessons, a part of that is a kind of offering of the things that we are kind of clinging on to, a deliberate offering of those. It's like a mini version of what Eric Clapton did, actually. He actually was practicing pratyahara in a very powerful way without knowing that it's called that, of course. But I presume, it can be very, very effective. But it also happens to be the meditation practice that brings us into a part of our mind. It's called the Atimanas Kosha. Now, I don't have the model here this week. I'm going to show that to you next week. But when we looked at the model of the mind last week briefly, there was 5 layers, and one of them was represented by the mad artist, was Salvador Dali, remember? So that's like this realm of imagination and creative thinking and ideas. Pratyahara is connected to that part of the mind. When you practice pratyahara, you get readier access to that, and it develops the imagination and creativity of that type. And that was absolutely what I experienced, ever since I started doing this practice, which is and following this path, is a much more ready access to the imagination and creative thinking. So there's this there's this whole link between this parts of the mind and the different practices in Ashtanga yoga. And next week we're going to look at the connection between dharana, which is concentration. There's more to it than that, but concentration, you could say the simplest form of concentration is what they call mindfulness. You've probably heard of mindfulness a lot. The mindfulness means paying attention to being in the present moment. That's a form of dharana. But dharana, there are many more sophisticated forms of dharana, of concentration. But that is connected to another kind of intuition, which I'm going to tell you about next week. So that's in the English, all right? So it's Sanskrit, English, it's magic. So here's your homework, all right? So I want you to assign time to your favorite natural withdrawal activity at least once this week. So you may not have the opportunity to go to the ocean, so it may not be your favorite, but see if you can find at least once. I mean, if you're lucky enough, like me, I live near a forest, so I can go and except I do have a problem. I get hay fever. So my favorite forest just nearby that's not closed, because some of the parks and that are closed, but this one's open and it's beautiful. Every time I go there, I get really, really bad hay fever. So that's a little frustrating, but hopefully you don't suffer from that. So make sure you go out at least once, hopefully even every day, but go somewhere and really spend a big chunk of time, and spend a decent hour or 2 hours in this really peaceful place that you like. And it might, if you want to be a bit adventurous, you know, go out at night somewhere where you can see a lot of stars, if that's one you like. And you know, that's something I think incredibly mentally healthy. It's very, I find it very purifying. I mentioned snowfields in that little list. None of you actually picked it, but one thing I noticed about being in the snow a lot is that it really has an effect on your mind. I used to run with some local Ananda Marga members in Europe. We used to have an annual meditation and skiing retreat in the Swiss Alps, which sounds a little indulgent. It was fantastic. We had a great time. And a group of maybe 15 of us would go for a week, and we'd you know, it's kind of expensive skiing, but we'd save money. We'd rent an apartment. Nobody was staying in a hotel, and we'd cook all our own food. So it became, you know, more affordable. And we go and ski all day. So we get up early in the morning, you know, we'll sing kirtan, meditate, do our yoga, have breakfast, ski all day. So you're out all day in this amazing, pristine environment with, you know, pure white snow. And I would pick some spot in the middle of the day to meditate on the mountaintop, you know, it's so quiet. And then ski all afternoon, and then come back and, you know, meditation, and then eat, and then kind of collapse, we're tired. So we did that every day for a week or more. And what I noticed is at the end of that period, my mind was like it had been purified. Like I had been looking at whiteness, and it had become internalized. And I felt like my mind had been cleaned. It was beautiful. I felt so fresh. It was extremely therapeutic, I think. So natural environments can have a deep impact on us, especially if we spend a fair bit of time there and do that regularly. So that's your first exercise, all right? And your second exercise is like this. So think back to that when we were earlier on, we're thinking about, okay, what is it that you think you need to let go of? And this can be very powerful. If you, as I said, it might be something relatively small, but you might feel that it's preventing you from doing what you really want to do, utilizing your time well, or it might be something stupid that you like eating, like potato chips or whatever it is. But pick one and say, okay, I suggest you try giving it up for a week, all right? But do this mentally, and if you mentally feel that you're letting it go, you can feel that you're holding this in your hands and actually offering it to the divine and letting that go. All right. And if you have learned this practice of what we call Guru Puja, you might apply it in that way. That's something, I don't know if all of you have that technique, but you know what I mean if you have that. So just try, you know, freeing yourself of one thing this week. And we're going to explore this subject further next week. So we have a little time for questions if you have any. And I'm going to remind you, what am I going to remind you about? Can you guess? The Vistara Circle YouTube channel. All right. So if you go to the top of the chat, you'll find a link there. So when we end this, I would like that the first thing you do is go there, click there, and you can subscribe. And there's hardly anything there. This is like the first, I think this is the first recorded live webinar that's going on it. So, but once you're subscribed, you'll get, and you click the little bell thing, because then you'll get notified whenever a new a video about meditation or that our teachers are creating. Whenever a new one pops up there, you'll know. You can go and enjoy that one. All right. So if anybody's got any questions, now's the time, or comments, or you want to say, tell us anything. How are you doing? Is everybody okay? You're very quiet this week. Usually you're all chatty. What happened? I'm gonna stop the sharing. Oh, hang on, wait a second. I want to make sure this one. Oh, that's my that's my ending slide. I forgot about that. Yes, you might know I'm a bit of an otter nerd. Okay, the otter's saying namaskar. All right. So was somebody going to tell us something? Oh, there we go. So anything to tell us before we go? Or is everybody off to subscribe to the Vistara Circle YouTube channel?
Have it. Where's the YouTube channel?
So if you go to the top of the chat, can you find the chat window?
Well, I don't have the whole chat. I have waterfall or stars toss up is the.
Can you scroll upwards?
There's nothing more.
Really? I'll try.
Yeah.
I'll post it again. Wait a second. It should have been there. Okay, let me. Or to all panelists and attendees, that goes there.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, we got it now.
Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you click on that and you can go. And as I said, it's sort of pretty, but a bit blank at the moment. But that will be populated very quickly with lots of lovely content. And yeah, we want to get lots of people to subscribe because it's new and we want to celebrate. All right. Thank you all very much. I will see you again on Tuesday. So as you know, there are lots of programs on the, every day we have live meditations and some yoga classes. I know on Saturday there's a really, I think it's Sunday morning, there's a really special yoga class with Dada Vishwarupananda. And you'll find all of that on the, if you go to Facebook and you just search for Vistara Circle, you'll find the whole schedule of classes and online events. Okay. Thanks all very much. See you on Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Deepak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaskar. Thank you.
Namaskar, Dada.
Thank you.
Hey, farewell. Thanks all so much. Okay, I'm going to end this in a second. And it will all be on. Oh, wait on. Oh, it's all nice messages. Namaskar to you, Didi.
Namaskar. I can be late. Yeah.
Nice.
I was was this session recorded?
Everything's recorded because we're streaming live to YouTube and Facebook, and both of those platforms automatically record everything.
Okay, so YouTube, where to go to watch on YouTube?
I think you, so if you go to the Vistara Circle YouTube channel that I just
I see.
raving
Okay.
on.
All right. All right. Okay.
Okay. Very good. That's what it's for. We're getting some echo here. Anyway, I think that's there now. Okay, we're actually going to end this thing now. Farewell. Namaskar. See you very soon on Tuesday.